The frosty wind bit at Jake's face as he trudged through the icy paths of the park, his thin jacket offering little protection from the bitter cold. His shoes, worn from endless wandering, crunched softly against the gravel as he scanned the ground for anything: an overlooked coin, a discarded scrap of food, anything that might help him survive another day. Meanwhile, just a few steps away, Barron Trump strolled through the park, his headphones in, lost in thought. To anyone passing by, he looked like any other teenager enjoying a peaceful walk, completely unaware that his sleek black wallet had slipped from his pocket and landed beneath a park bench. Jake's eyes caught a glimmer beneath the bench, and his heart raced as he bent down to pick it up. His fingers trembled as he opened the wallet, revealing a neat stack of crisp bills, credit cards, and an ID card. The name stared back at him: Barron Trump. For a moment, Jake froze, the weight of the wallet heavy in his hands, as the enormity of what he had just found sank in. What would he do? The money could buy him food, warm clothes, maybe even a place to sleep for weeks. But as Jake stood there, torn between survival and the values his mother had instilled in him, one thing became clear: this decision would change his life forever. Little did Jake know, this was only the beginning of a story that would leave the world speechless. Jake stood motionless, clutching the wallet tightly in his hands. The icy wind cut through him, but he barely felt it as his mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. Inside that wallet was enough money to buy him warm food, a decent coat, maybe even a night in a shelter. For someone like Jake, who had spent countless nights shivering on park benches, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to escape the relentless grip of hunger and cold. But then, a voice from his past echoed in his mind, his mother's voice, calm but firm. Do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. Your character is worth more than anything money can buy. A flood of memories washed over him. Her tired hands preparing meals from almost nothing. Her unwavering insistence on honesty, even in the face of their struggles. Jake looked down at the name on the ID: Barron Trump. Whoever this belonged to, they probably didn't even notice it was missing yet. He glanced at the money one last time before snapping the wallet shut. With a deep breath and a heavy heart, he made his decision. Approaching a nearby park officer, Jake hesitated, his voice shaking as he held out the wallet. I found this under a bench, he said, struggling to keep his hand steady. It belongs to, well, you can see the name. The officer raised an eyebrow as he inspected the wallet, his expression shifting when he saw the ID. Barron Trump? He muttered, giving Jake a curious look. You sure you want to hand this over? That's a lot of cash. Jake nodded firmly, though the temptation gnawed at him. It's not mine, he said quietly. I just wanted to make sure it gets back to the owner. The officer studied him for a moment before nodding. You did the right thing, kid. Not everyone would. As the officer walked away with the wallet, Jake turned back toward the frosty park steps. Part of him felt the sting of giving up what could have been a lifeline, but another part felt something stronger. A quiet pride, a flicker of warmth that even the bitter wind couldn't extinguish. The next morning, Jake woke to the familiar chill of his park bench, the events of the previous day already feeling like a distant memory. But as he stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, a sharply dressed man approached him, standing out against the usual backdrop of joggers and dog walkers. Are you Jake? The man asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Jake froze for a moment, nodding hesitantly. The man reached into his coat pocket and handed Jake a sleek business card embossed with gold lettering. I'm with the Trump family. Mr. Barron Trump was very impressed by your honesty in returning his wallet. He would like to meet you. Can you come to Trump Tower this afternoon? Jake's jaw dropped. Wait, this is real? He stammered, clutching the card like it might disappear. The man nodded with a faint smile. Very real. Mr. Trump doesn't take acts of integrity lightly. We'll arrange for transportation if needed. Jake's heart raced as the man walked away, leaving him holding the card that felt heavier than it should. Skeptical yet hopeful, Jake rushed to a nearby shelter, borrowing a clean shirt and doing his best to smooth his hair with his fingers. The thought of stepping into Trump Tower felt surreal, like entering a world he'd only ever seen on TV. By the time he arrived, the gleaming golden facade of the building reflected the sunlight, nearly blinding him. Jake hesitated for a moment, staring up at the towering structure, before mustering the courage to step inside. The marble floors, shimmering chandeliers, and perfectly dressed staff made him acutely aware of his scuffed shoes and borrowed clothes. But then, a familiar figure appeared. Barron Trump walked up to him, his hand extended in a gesture that felt surprisingly genuine. "Jake," he said with a smile, "I wanted to thank you personally. What you did, not everyone would have done that." Jake shook his hand nervously, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just thought it was the right thing to do." Barron's smile widened. "That's what makes it so impressive. People talk about doing the right thing, but when no one's watching, it's a different story. You showed courage, and that deserves recognition." As Jake stood there, surrounded by the opulence of a world far removed from his own, he couldn't help but feel both overwhelmed and validated. For the first time in a long time, he felt like his choices, his integrity, had truly mattered. As Jake stood in awe, taking in the grandeur of Trump Tower, Barron led him through the gilded hallways to a private office. Jake's nerves heightened with every step, his mind racing. What could possibly come next? Inside, another imposing figure awaited, Donald Trump himself. Jake froze as Trump extended his hand, his commanding presence filling the room. "So, you're the young man who returned my son's wallet," Trump said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. Jake nodded shyly, shaking Trump's hand. "Yes, sir, I thought it was the right thing to do." Trump smiled, exchanging a glance with Barron. "Not everyone would have made that choice, Jake. It says a lot about your character." Taking a seat, Trump gestured for Jake to do the same. "Barron told me about you, and we've been thinking. It's clear you have potential, but life hasn't given you the chances you deserve. I'd like to change that." Jake's heart pounded as Trump continued. "We'll set you up with an apartment, a real place to call home. Your mother will have a steady job at one of our properties, and we'll cover your education, giving you the tools to build the future you deserve." Jake's mouth went dry, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. Trump leaned forward, his tone serious but kind. "Say yes, Jake, then show us what you're capable of." Tears welled in Jake's eyes as he nodded, a mix of disbelief and determination flooding through him. For the first time in years, hope felt real. Jake's new life began with a quiet moment of disbelief as he stood in the doorway of his apartment. The warm space, modest yet comfortable, felt like a dream. For someone who had spent countless nights on cold park benches, the sight of a clean bed, stocked fridge, and a roof overhead was overwhelming. Jake sank into the soft couch, his hands trembling as he whispered, "This is real." Soon, Jake's days were filled with a whirlwind of new experiences. Attending a private school was like stepping into another world. The neatly pressed uniforms, polished hallways, and confident students made Jake feel like a stranger. Whispers followed him in the halls. "Isn't that the kid Barron brought in? Does he even belong here?" The comments stung, but Jake refused to let them define him. Determined to prove himself, Jake threw everything he had into his studies. Late nights with textbooks and early mornings of preparation became his routine. The same grit that had helped him survive on the streets now fueled his drive to succeed. Teachers began to notice his effort, and slowly respect replaced skepticism. Through it all, Barron remained a constant source of support. They spent time together after school, discussing ambitions, challenges, and the values that mattered most. "Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth," Barron told him one afternoon. "You've already proven that you belong." Those words became Jake's anchor. With Barron's mentorship and his own relentless determination, Jake began to find his place in a world that had once felt completely out of reach. The grand ballroom buzzed with energy as Jake mingled cautiously among the guests at a high-profile Trump event. Surrounded by business leaders and influential figures, he felt the weight of his new world pressing down on him. Yet despite his nerves, he had learned to observe and listen, soaking in lessons from every interaction. Toward the end of the evening, a sharply dressed businessman approached Jake with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jake," the man began smoothly, "I've heard a lot about you. Quite the story." Jake nodded politely, unsure of where the conversation was heading. The man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You've got access to something most people only dream of. Trump's trust. That's a powerful thing. I've got a deal in the works, and with a little insight from you, we could both benefit. Think about it. No one has to know." Jake's stomach churned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The temptation was clear, a chance for quick money, an easy win. But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Do the right thing, no matter how hard it is." He remembered Barron's words too. Integrity is everything. Jake took a deep breath and met the man's gaze. "I can't do that," he said firmly. "It's not right. Integrity isn't for sale." The man's smile faltered, replaced by a cold smirk. "Suit yourself," he said, walking away. But Jake didn't care. He had made his choice, and it was the right one. When Barron and his family learned of the incident, their pride in Jake only deepened. "You showed real character tonight," Barron told him. "Most wouldn't have done what you did." Jake sat across from Barron in a quiet corner of Trump Tower, his hands clasped tightly as he spoke with urgency. "Barron," he began, his voice steady but filled with passion. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened to me, and I can't shake the feeling that there are so many kids out there, just like I was, who need someone to believe in them. I want to help them. I want to create a mentorship program for underprivileged kids, give them the same second chance I got." Barron leaned back, a thoughtful smile spreading across his face. "You've got a good heart, Jake," he said. "And you're right. This is exactly the kind of legacy we should be building. Let's do it." With Barron's support, Jake threw himself into the project. He visited shelters, met with local leaders, and tirelessly planned the initiative, which they called Second Chance Futures. The program aimed to provide mentorship, education, and opportunities for kids facing the same hardships Jake once endured. On launch day, Jake stood in front of a group of kids at a local shelter, his voice filled with emotion as he shared his story. "I know what it's like to feel invisible, like no one cares. I've been where you are. But one act of honesty, one decision to do the right thing, changed my life. And it can change yours too." The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. Jake continued, "You have the strength to overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seems. This program is here to help you find your path, just like someone once helped me." As the kids clapped and cheered, Jake felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had turned his struggles into something meaningful, a beacon of hope for others. On a cold evening, Jake found himself back in Central Park, the place where his journey had begun. The icy wind whipped through the trees, but this time, he felt its bite less keenly. Wrapped in a warm coat and standing on firm ground, he looked around, remembering the countless nights he had spent here, struggling to survive. As he wandered, he spotted a familiar figure hunched on a bench. Mr. Green, the elderly man who had once shared bread and kind words with him during his darkest days. Jake's heart swelled with emotion as he approached. "Mr. Green," he called softly, his voice trembling with both joy and sorrow. The old man turned, squinting through the dim light, and then his face lit up. "Jake? Is that really you?" Jake nodded, sitting beside him. They talked for hours, catching up on all that had changed. When Mr. Green spoke of his struggles, Jake felt a pang of the familiar pain. Without hesitation, he made a promise. "You helped me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to help you. Let's get you somewhere warm and safe." With Jake's support, Mr. Green found shelter, and for the first time in years, he felt hope for a brighter future. Later, at the grand launch event for Second Chance Futures, Jake stood on stage alongside Barron, the crowd applauding wildly. As the cameras flashed, Jake reflected on the extraordinary path that had brought him here. "Sometimes," he said, his voice steady but emotional, "doing the right thing feels small, almost insignificant, but it can lead to something extraordinary. Integrity isn't just about what you do. It's about the lives you touch along the way." The final scene showed Jake and Barron shaking hands, surrounded by the kids the program would help, a powerful symbol of how one act of kindness could ripple out to change the world.